Okay. Tweet it out. And we are good.
Barely see.
You can barely see?
Yeah, well.
Are you good?
Yep.
Okay. So the basic impetus for this conversation, which is now our third in my vaunted,
Hi, everybody. If there's
vaunted
anybody
YouTube
watching.
chat series, is, hold on, let me X out of something over here. Okay, so we are basically 5 weeks out from the election, the Trumpocalypse, and it still feels like a certain amount of hysteria is pervading the so-called elite classes, which you have chronicled so ably, or at least you've chronicled their failings so ably, and I've tried to do my part on that score as well. To me, it seems like they're still grasping at straws in large part. They don't want to accept that their premises were wrong. They don't want to accept that they are culpable in a major sense for what transpired. They are latching on to extraneous explanations for the election results, such as Russian interference, Russian hacking. That's the big hysteria this week, but in previous weeks it's been James Comey and the FBI, and they want to cling to their popular vote win as vindication somehow. They want to have a harebrained electoral college coup attempt. And we could go down the list. I mean, there was even some who latched onto this far-fetched recount effort, which went nowhere. So it seems to me like they're sort of straining for any reason why they don't need to introspect. And by they, you know who I'm talking about. Is that the way you see it thus far, or do you think there has been any sincere attempt at introspection, or how do you summarize it?
I follow it. I follow the machinations in and outs a lot less closely since the election, to be honest. I have a less of a grasp of the details of everything you just said. I mean, I see that as taking place. I can't say with certainty much of anything, which I feel like is kind of the prudent way to approach this thing. Is just kind of wait here and try to figure out what's going on. To your larger theme, for instance, there are some things that are just outright silly in my mind, like the idea that the election was stolen or the recount. That was just dumb. The other things you mentioned, again, I don't follow it closely, and I think the judgment, what little I've seen, I'd say, wait 3 months, 6 months. There's never a good, with breaking news and things, there's never a good sense to rush to judgment. But I will agree with you that there's a knee-jerk response out there and a general sense of looking for anything to blame except for things they might be responsible for. So I largely blame the front row kids. You call them the elite. I call them the front row kids. The Clintons, the Bushes, the people who support both of those camps. The DC, and New York City, LA triumvirate that support those camps as being responsible for having built a system that doesn't work for everybody in this country, and this is payback for that. This is some measure of payback for that. I don't think anybody's really addressing that issue at all. I think there's a lot of ass covering, a lot of looking for just excuses, basically, and trying to focus on those excuses, and rather than looking at the whole basket of issues. I just was writing earlier today that that was very similar to what I saw on Wall Street. I mean, I worked on Wall Street for 20 years. I was there when the financial crisis hit. My bank lost $50 billion. We got bailed out. The same thing happened then. Nobody took blame. Nobody actually said hey, maybe the whole structure we built is just broken and wrong. And so they just looked, nobody said, hey, this whole laissez-faire approach, this free market approach without regulation, this massive leverage banks that have effectively put government guarantees isn't a problem. They said no. In fact, we should never have lent to poor people, or there was too much regulation, or the free market should have been freer. So they doubled down on a philosophy that was wrong, and by doing that, and the way to double down on a broken philosophy, or a philosophy that had proven to be failed or mistaken, was to just find scapegoats, and that's going on as well right now. So that's certainly going on. There seems to be no. I don't think anybody's suffering, other than us voters who got fucked by having a President Trump. I happen to not want him to be president. We're all fucked by the incoming administration, in my opinion. But there's no people who were very instrumental in losing the election, who I feel are suffering any consequences. No pundits who got it explicitly wrong, and damningly wrong, who have suffered because of it. No leaders in the political movements who have come out and said, "Hey, I messed up. Let's rethink our whole strategy." So,
and it's human nature, if you have committed some grave wrongdoing, to resist taking blame for that wrongdoing to whatever extent you're able. And I think the financial crisis is a worthy analog here, and in some sense, the Iraq War. I mean, those are the two foundational seismic events probably of our contemporary politics, right? And those were characterized by mass elite failure, which caused massive destruction and death.
And again, and in both cases, the working people suffered the most.
Right, and nobody who was responsible for facilitating those events took direct personal responsibility or accepted that they were culpable. And I think, the 2016 election is the media class's version of those two catastrophes. Obviously, they are implicated as well in especially Iraq, but also the financial crisis. But given the power that they wield in crafting the narratives around the electoral process, their failures with regard to Trump and even Clinton and Sanders and Cruz and the whole other cast of characters was so much more stark, and their failures were so much more blatant and observable this time. So I've tried to do what little I can to force certain people who I identify as culpable. I try to assign them blame, and unsurprisingly, they're often resistant to accepting it.
Well,
but unless people are forceful about it and try to coerce an admission of guilt out of them, I've always maintained that should have no confidence whatsoever that anything like this will be averted in the future.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't really need to. I don't want to see people. I don't need to see people, individuals, humiliated or punished. But what scares me more is I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for us to get it and change the way our system operates. And if we don't, I mean, the mistakes, the underestimating Trump, the not getting him, the not taking his voters seriously, just assigning them a clown-like status, is why he keeps winning. Because
and it's why he'll continue winning, by the way. And yeah, it's not about.
I mean, like, just. I mean, I don't. I mean, so I'm not looking for saying, hey, you really fucked up. You need to be suffer for it. What I'm looking for is, hey, people to say, hey, I get it. We messed up. Let's figure out a way to not mess up in the future to stop this guy. So, you know, the Hamilton thing, and I hate to look at, you know, Trump has a great way of creating a distraction. So the ruling class, the front row kids, you know, they're here. They have this world this bubble they exist in here. And, you know, the back row kids, the people who voted for Trump, communities that voted for Trump have this bubble here. They're both bubbles. And there's this big distance between them. And the problem with the front row kids is they don't understand the distance, and they don't understand how different they are from the back row kids, and they don't understand how they're viewed by the back row kids, and they don't speak the language of the back row kids. And people speak a different language these days effectively. And so Trump is great at exploiting that difference. He says, hey, so he's fucking the back row kids in policy. He's putting in, you know, an agenda that's going to screw them economically, and he's able to do that because he creates a distraction that makes that makes the back row kids get outraged. Effectively, the front row kids get outraged. He says, hey, you know, he sends Pence to Hamilton, and, you know, and Pence gets lectured, and the front row goes ballistic, and the back row goes, oh fuck, you know what? Those front row kids are awful people. I don't want to be with them.
And this goes back to why
it was a Chili's thing too. I mean, he creates these dumb distractions that resonate and work because the front row kids, you know, the elites, whatever you want to call them, don't get it. Don't get they're being played. And so now the front row kids are being played so he can get his policy through, and the back row kids are getting played as well.
And this goes back to why I've taken it upon myself to try to demand some accountability. It's not because I want to extract, you know, melodramatic confessions or admissions of sin from these people, or try to inflict humiliation or pain or punishment. It's because if they don't alter their behavior, they will continue to fail, and they will furthermore weaken themselves as an opposition force against Trump. I mean, they will get steamrolled by Trump. I mean, I don't want to name names, but I guess I'll name a couple. I mean, can you imagine like Ezra Klein and Joan Walsh and Debbie Wasserman Schultz leading the opposition to Trump? I mean, they're going to get slaughtered.
They're not the ones going to get steamrolled. They're going to continue to have their plum pay and their plum positions. We're the ones that are going to get steamrolled because they're going to be involved in a strategy that's going to end up empowering Trump further. So, you know, I mean, it's like,
right. So they don't have anything like materially to lose.
No, they don't.
They're going to lose on the argumentative and discursive and political front.
Being outraged at Trump and being simply outraged and not focusing on treating him like a candidate who's serious and needs to be treated seriously and contested seriously. There's a whole cottage industry right now simply that will make money by invoking outrage. So there's going to be a whole slew of people, and they're already coming out of the woodworks, who are going to become the people who fall into Trump's trap and simply at anything Trump does, just simply go ballistic, overblow it, miss the point of it, miss that they're being played. They're going to play right into his trap, and they personally are going to make money from it because it's you know, right now it sells to the liberal base. It's kind of like what happened when Obama was in power. There was a whole right-wing cottage industry of outrage that made a lot of money off of invoking outrage amongst the conservative base.
Yeah, it's like outrage is for its own sake. I mean, outrage can be a worthwhile commodity, but when it's just deployed for commercial reasons or stoked for commercial reasons, I mean, that's corrosive.
I mean, and the thing is, I'm not saying they're saying to themselves, wow, look, I can make an easy buck by falling into Trump's trap, but it just goes along with the territory. Hey, look, I got fucking 2,000 retweets by saying, you know, something absurd, some whatever the meme of absurdity is at the time. Trump's going to, close your account. Trump's going to steal your account. There's somebody who, I don't know who it was. Somebody.
Kurt Eichenwald. I mean, Kurt Eichenwald said at some point that he sold off all his stocks or something. Like he's trying to create a bank run or something.
I saw someone else saying, do me a favor. I don't have much time left. Archive all my tweets. They're going to be stolen. I mean, come on. Jesus. And the thing is,
they render themselves foolish. I mean, they discredit themselves, and it proves? It proves that their aim is not to act as an effective counterbalance to Trump. It's to stoke outrage for its own sake. Because if they wanted to effectively counter Trump, they would modify their behavior.
But see, I don't think they're doing it cynically like that. I think it's more for it's killing two birds with one stone. It's like
I think it's subconscious for the most part. Cynical and subconscious, a combination.
The problem is that people, if you don't take Trump seriously and don't get how he works and don't get that there are valid reasons people voted for him. Not all the reasons people voted for him are valid, but there are some valid reasons. If you don't get that the system is broken, if you're in these towns, if you're in these communities, if you're somebody growing up in some, Rust Belt state, or you grew up in a podunk town in New Hampshire, for you, the system is rigged against you. It's not as rigged as much as you think it is, but it's still rigged. And if people don't accept that we fundamentally built a country in which it sucks for a lot of people. It sucks for a majority of people, and it's rigged against them. If we don't accept that, we're going to continue to have people like Trump come in. Trump may not only last one term, but then another populace is going to play on people's fears and anger and distrust. It's a broken country with a rigged system against a lot of people, and Trump exploits that.
And here's another amazing irony.
Let me just everybody's going to ask, well, what about minorities? They have this. Of course they have this. They have it more in spades. They've been fucked for so many years. You grew up. I spent more time in minority communities, seeing people spending time with communities who kids are born in a situation where they don't have a chance. They have all the problems somebody in a white person in a working belt Rust Belt town has, +5. They got systematic racism against them. And right now, they're happening to vote for Clinton. They're listening to her. They voted for the Democrats because they're Democrats. At some point, they're just going to give up too, man. And you know what? A lot of them have already been disenfranchised. And so
many of them did give up. I mean, that's why their turnout dropped.
No, so there was a sense of you go. I was in Milwaukee like 3 weeks before the election, and the most segregated town in the United States. I spent a week in the black section of town, and people had given up. A lot of them had given up. Some of them duly voted for Clinton. That's what they did, but there wasn't any enthusiasm. And the thing is, 4 more years, you think, oh well, this back row, they're playing along in the system. I don't know how long they're going to last. How much more they're willing to put into the system, because they're being screwed even more.
And here's an amazing irony. I mean, you talk about how people need to recognize that for vast swaths of the country, the system is rigged and the system has failed and is broken. But here's another facet of society that's apparently broken. The ruling class is broken, and you can tell. Although they're doing very well materially, and they don't have anything to worry about in the short term about their personal wealth or that kind of thing, and the stock market is doing well. The fact that they can't modify their behavior to counter Trump effectively, and the fact that they are so resistant to change in the Democratic Party as well, apparently. This shows that they're fundamentally incompetent or wayward, or they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they're not even a proper ruling class. Doug Henwood, who I've spoken to on here before, talks about this a lot. It's not even a robust ruling class anymore. I mean, they're laughably incompetent, and they can't do something simple like devise a strategy to defeat the guy from The Apprentice. So I mean that aspect of society is coming apart at the seams as well.
I mean, I keep on going back to this, but as a banker, I spent part of my time banking in Latin America, and I watched Chavez come to power. And Chavez came to power partly because the ruling elite in Venezuela was corrupt and in denial, and they didn't take Chavez seriously. They refused to take him seriously, and they kept underestimating him, and as he rose to power, they got divided and they splintered and they fought each other and they splintered each other. And that's kind of what's happening now in opposition to Trump is they refuse to take him seriously, and they'd rather just go with the idea that he's a cartoon character, and the only reason he has support is because there's a bunch of fucking idiots who are also cartoon characters who are voting for him.
Well, I mean,
we just assigned it to this kind of, it's just this thing that's beneath them. Why do we have to bother? I cannot believe this idiot has other idiots, and why will they won't deal with it? You got to deal with it on a serious level.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that the phrase "not taking them seriously" is quite the right way to put it at this point. It's sort of like a paradox, because on the one hand, they do take that jokey attitude where he's still this clownish figure and his supporters are all these clownish caricatures. But on the other, you'll see them invoke the most serious possible rhetoric to describe what Trump has doing, such that they'd even contemplate these baddie electoral college subversion schemes, or they'd call him a fascist, or they would latch onto these Russia conspiracy theories. So on the one hand, they do take him sort of hyper seriously and almost too seriously, in the sense that they'll spend a full day freaking out about a tweet. So it's just their entire attitude is just sort of distorted and warped.
Okay, let me just do this. This is a bell curve. This is reality here. The problem is you need to be here with Trump.
Thank you, Charles Murray.
You need to be here, right here, taking. And the problem is I'm saying this is cartoonish over here, and this is hyper serious over here. Hyper serious, cartoonish. So the point is, they're operating in the fringes of reality in both cases. In one case is they're saying we can't take. He's cartoonish. He's a joke. His followers are jokes. There's no validity there. And the other one, they're saying, oh my God, he's a Nazi incarnate. Incarnate. He's a Nazi. And in both cases, it's not grappling with the reality in front of you, that he has voters, 6% of the electorate, whatever the hell it was, who voted for him, and not all 100% of that 46%, and all 100% of Trump voters are racist idiots. There's a lot of diversity in that group, and there's a fair number of them who have valid concerns about the direction of this country, and about the direction and how it's treated them, and what their prospects are going forward. The biggest differential is, do you feel like your kids are gonna do better than you, or do you feel like you're doing better than your parents? And for a lot of people in this country, the answer is no.
Yeah, Freddie DeBoer just had a column in The Guardian, I think yesterday, where he notes that there have been a raft of studies in the past few years showing that people today have unprecedentedly low confidence that their children will do better than them, and likewise, people have no confidence that they will do better than their parents in terms of just economic security.
That's particularly true around the white working class.
So of course it's going to manifest politically.
Right. With Hispanics and African Americans, that's less true, and that partly explains the differential in anger right now, which is, I mean, the happiest town I've been to in the United States, over my 200,000 miles, is also one of the poorest. It's El Paso, and part of the reason being is the people in the second ward, I believe it is, who have family income of like $18,000, live literally against a fence dividing Mexico from the United States. They're Hispanic Latinos, and they can look out their window and look over the fence and see what they've escaped and what they used to have and how much worse it was. So the sense is they're doing much, much better. They may not have a lot, but they're doing a lot better than they used to. They open their windows and at night there's gunshots, 20 yards away. It happens not to be, in any danger to them because it's on the other side of the fence. So there's this real sense of, hey, you know what, I got it. I mean, on an absolute level, I may not have it great, but on a relative level, and a visceral level, they know that every day. Now, if you're in Buffalo, or if you're in Utica, or if you're in, the Mahoning Valley in Ohio, that's not the case necessarily. You don't feel that. You compare yourself to your parents, and you have it worse than your parents. And your kids are probably going to have it worse than you. And that's humiliating and frustrating. It makes you feel.
Something I've always wanted to get a good answer for is, so there's this tortured impulse, and there has been, and there still is this impulse to try to sort out which Trump supporters had motivations that are seen as reasonable and which ones didn't. But why was there never anything analogous applied to Hillary's voters? I mean, people always talk about economic anxiety fueling Trump. Well, I mean, Hillary improved on Obama 2012 among extremely wealthy voters. So were they also fueled by economic anxiety? I mean, what about these people clustered in the Washington, D.C. suburbs who turned out for her in droves, and in Manhattan and parts of, the more wealthy parts of California? I mean, did they have legitimate, sound reasons for really passionately supporting Hillary? Why doesn't even anybody ask that question? It just seems like Trump supporters constantly feel like they're under the microscope to an extent that is not warranted by their lights, and they wonder why the same critical eye is never applied to people who have other political preferences.
I think people have said it. I've heard people say the opposite, which is we should pay more attention. Certainly have made that accusation towards me that I've written too much about Trump voters, when in fact I've written more about Hillary voters. I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. Why in my thesis, the back row versus front row, the African American community, which is for all intents and purposes in the back row, in my classification, voted for the Clintons, and I've made multiple. I've explained that multiple reasons that
But how about the extremely wealthy liberal Democrats, or who loathe Sanders, who are the stalwart Hillary people in the primary, who carried her to victory in places like Arlington County, Virginia, and Orange County, California? Are their motives pure? I mean, why isn't there any kind of skepticism about what was animating those people?
I mean, I think it's in my mind, it's pretty clear they're part of the status quo, and Clinton was, a continuation of the status quo. It may not be the exact status quo many of them wanted. They'd rather have Jeb, but Clinton was a lot closer to Jeb than Trump was in their estimation. So for them, it was. They're doing well. I mean, it's I keep on saying it's people who are in the money and out of the money. If you're in the money and you're doing well, and you have an annuity and the status quo pays you an annuity and gives you a lot of lots of standing in the community, both economically and culturally and socially, you're going to vote for Clinton because she's a continuation of the same system over the last 30 years. She's hardly any different than her husband. She's hardly any different than Obama. She's hardly that much different than the first Bush, not crazily different from the second Bush, and that system has worked for you. clearly has worked for you. You're living in Arlington. You got some government contract that pays you $150 a year, $180 a year, whatever. 70 a year, and things are working for you. So
yeah, one theory that I've been batting around, and I actually wrote a post on this, I guess a week and a half or 2 weeks ago now, is having gone on an Arnade style trip myself recently. One thing that occurred to me is that when you go to some of these places and you talk to people, you can't help but be acutely aware of the fact that there is literally zero national media presence in even places that are densely populated in some cases.
So, no, there's none.
So the example that I mentioned to you, I think, is Pensacola, Florida. So Pensacola, Florida, it's a mid-sized city, right? It's not Manhattan, but there are plenty of people there. I mean, there's plenty of infrastructure, plenty of culture, plenty of interesting local issues that a robust national media might cover. But there's just none there. And this is one of the great. So obviously the interests of people who predominate in Pensacola, Florida, are not going to be represented in the popular national media depiction of what the political climate is like. And that's one of the great ironies of this internet media era that we're in. One of the promises of it was supposed to be that generally your work, journalism and commentary and punditry can be conducted from anywhere. I mean, you could do it from Antarctica, but I mean, you could also do it from Pensacola. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from going to Pensacola and doing what some of these people do. So, but even so, they all cluster in the same 2 or 3 places anyway. So you almost get the worst of both worlds. I mean, you have the same sort of geographic clustering effect that people thought might be lessened, but it's actually been heightened in the internet era, and it's actually walled people off even more from some of the places that are underrepresented in the sort of national media discussion, so to say.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think I got yelled at on Twitter because I did a tweet storm about this. A man threading about this, and I failed to say that I was only talking about parts of New York. But yeah, living in New York as a media person, confining yourself to Upper West Side, Upper East Side, or Brooklyn Heights, or Cobble Hill, you no matter how well intentioned you are, you're a foreigner to the rest of the U.S. And in many ways, you'll end up viewing the rest of the U.S. as foreign to you. Like I said, you end up speaking a different language, and you can be the most well-intentioned person who doesn't want to fall down that trap, and you'll fall down that trap. So when you do write about Pensacola or Mississippi Delta or El Paso, you do it in a way that just ends up confirming whatever your priors are. Because you don't live there. It takes a while. It takes a while to. You need to live in Pensacola. You need to live in Mississippi for a while before you start figuring out how many priors you had and how you really don't speak the language. How you speak a different language. It takes a while to figure it out. And that's why I said, people are like, well, look, all the Trump profile pieces. Well, yeah, there were a lot of Trump profile pieces, but they should have been done 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. There should have been pieces about, which is why I started my series on poverty in America a year and a half ago, is because there weren't being pieces like that generated about minority poverty or white poverty, or in general writing about the working class of any color. And so when they were done badly. The people just flew in real quick, jumped in and said, hey, I'll write a piece on this working class town. They should have been doing that 7 years ago. And they should have been doing it by living there.
Yeah, it's like, let me find the paradigmatic unemployed steel worker somewhere who's going to please my editor. I mean, that's basically
because I have to get a deadline. or you know.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Like,
But so it's like it's one of my quip was, you know, I'm sure in the New York Times newsroom or the New Yorker when Trump started breaking out and they needed stories about him. I'm sure the editor says, "Get me my smartest Harvard grad, send him to Mississippi," you know, as opposed to, hey, what about our guy who's been living in Mississippi for 10 years? Let's have him write a piece. They don't have those people.
You know, there used to be things called bureaus where people would actually live in these areas and they would report back to the home base, but those don't exist anymore, really.
I mean, what I was trying to get at with that tweet storm is, if you're a media person or if you're a front row kid, not if you're, you know, you're going to live in 5 communities in New York City, and you're not going to go to East New York, and you're not going to go to Hunts Point, and if you're going to go to them, you're only going to go to them, you know, to do a store.
And this is the thing. I mean, people talk about white working class. I mean, there are white working class areas of New York City that people could go to and take a 45-minute subway ride, and they'll be there. I mean, go to Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, or go to New Dorp, Staten Island. I mean, these places. I don't want to demean New York City. I mean, it's a great sprawling metropolis, and there's a lot to like about it.
The media elite, the front row kids, don't go there. They don't live there. They live in their little bubble within the city itself. I mean, and so, I mean, you know, when I got to New York in 1992, I met people in New York who'd lived there all their life who hadn't been to Queens other than to get to the airport. You know, had never been to Staten Island except on the interstate, on the BQE. You know, yeah. I mean, this wasn't an exaggeration. These are people who worked, you know, in finance who had never been to Staten Island. You know,
it's a one free ferry ride away. I mean, you can't take a day trip sometime.
but the point being is we choose to live in bubbles, and you know the people, the white working class chooses to live in a bubble too. It just so happens right now that the front row kids run shit.
But it's not the job of the white working class to accurately assess the electorate, right? So I mean, it's not incumbent on them professionally to expand their horizons in the same way it would be for these other people.
I mean, as a basically a socialist and Marxist, if you're the working class, I think, you know, the people in control have in my mind, a greater obligation to not bubble themselves. But you know, that's my own view. But the point is that we live in bubble countries, and I've come to the conclusion the best way to describe it is we just speak different languages, you know. And so when I look at Paul Krugman trying to understand what's going on, it's kind of cute. I mean, I think he has good intentions, but he's so far off base. It's just it's kind of watching, trying to read something in another language. He's just kind of groping in the dark. You know, I hope he gets there.
And he's another one who's now saying that the election is illegitimate.
You know,
and things should be done to delegitimize Trump, and he's playing up the Russia stuff. He's playing up the Electoral College. So he's another one who's refusing to introspect because he doesn't feel like he's done anything wrong. I don't think it's necessarily out of nefarious motive. It's just that he's in this cloistered space where he's, you know, the Nobel Prize winner, and he should be able to dictate to everybody else what is right and proper.
I thought it was funny. He wrote a piece about trying to make something about fast foods, and you know, me and my McDonald's. And I thought that one of the ironies was, or one of the small sides was, he had picked up this idea that maybe he didn't understand the working class because he didn't go to McDonald's. He didn't pick it up by happening to go into a McDonald's. He picked it up by reading Matt Iglesias' piece saying that. and Matt Iglesias didn't pick it up by going to McDonald's. He just, you know, he thought it up on a computer. So it's kind of like,
how perfect is that, by the way? That's such a perfect representation.
So it's like groping in the dark. You know, maybe I just want to shake him and say, God damn it, you're a smart guy, you're a well-intentioned guy. Get fucking out from behind your computer and go out.
At the same time, I mean, like, Krugman is at a point where even if he did like make some overt attempt to inhabit some of these places where people who are alien to him inhabit, it would come off as fake and phony. I mean,
Yeah, but
David Brooks, David Brooks, David Brooks wrote a column about him going to an Applebee's, so he could connect with Middle America, and it was roundly mocked because it just came off as
you don't. This isn't done in one night. That's my point. This is done after 4. I've been doing this. First of all, I grew up in a white working class town, so that's what I came from, and I lived there for 20 goddamn years. That was my life before I got out of there, and I've been doing this thing, of writing about poverty and addiction and frustration for 6 years now, 7 years, and I still don't get it. So, it's taken a long time, and I don't claim to speak for anybody, and I don't claim to understand it, but I understand a lot better. I understand a lot better than I did 6 years ago. I understand a lot better than I did 2 years ago, because I kind of had to at some point go through the process of realizing I didn't get it. So that first 6 months, I'm like, I get it, and I didn't get it. So it took a long time you can't do it in one trip. You can't just walk into a McDonald's and Applebee's in one night, figure it out. It takes 6 years, man. Sometimes more.
And that's why I before I can take at face value some of these admissions of guilt that some people have put forward about why they miss the salience of the Trump phenomenon and why they got everything so wrong, is because there's no indication that they'll do anything tangible, meaning these media institutions and people within those institutions. I've seen nothing thus far that they're going to take to indicate that they will take actual tangible steps to modify their behavior. And one step they could take is to resist this clustering in 2 or 3 places, Washington, D.C., New York, maybe San Francisco, and try to conduct national media from elsewhere. I mean, there's no necessary reason why a national media outlet can't be based in Pensacola. It doesn't have to be Pensacola. It doesn't even have to necessarily be a red state. Like, why not New Orleans? So New Orleans is one of the most...
You just need some columnists. You need some people. You need some reporters. I guess Chris Hayes it was good. He did something from Wisconsin. That's a start.
But MSNBC is still going to be based in 30 Rock. So you can go do a one-off episode in Wisconsin somewhere.
It's a start.
But I wonder, why isn't there a national media enterprise or outfit that is based in, say, New Orleans, which is one of the crown jewels of the country, one of the most unique cities in the world? I mean, why is that? Even New Orleans is totally devoid of any national media presence. I just want to know why.
I think the baby steps, man. The first step is to get them to hire some columnists and some reporters who don't live in New York City and don't live in D.C., and then go from there as a start. Just get some voices, other than instead of sending them, Paul Krugman to get re-educated on a tour to spend a night in McDonald's or spend a day in Applebee's. They need to just get some people who have different perspectives and who don't live in the city.
And that's why
or get people who live in the city who live in the Bronx, or or live in beds, or live in East New York, or grew up in New York.
Or better yet, why not relocate completely to a Pensacola or New Orleans? I know that sounds extreme, but why can't a media organization be based in one of those places? There's no necessary reason why not.
They don't got good food.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to try to practice what I preach in the next couple months. I do think I am going to relocate to one of these more far-flung places. I know you've talked up El Paso. I really liked Asheville, North Carolina. I'm open-minded about it. So but I feel like I should embody what I'm urging and do it myself. So I'm going to.
Moving out of the city was one of the better things I've done, and being on the road half the year is also one of the better things I've done in terms of, like I said, figuring shit out. But it was a long process. It took a long, and I'm still not there, and I still don't know shit. It takes a while. It takes a while. But yeah, I guess at this point I'm depressed because I don't think people are getting it, and people are continuing the same a lot of people are continuing the same process of just not taking this threat. I'll rephrase it for you as your point. Not taking this threat, not approaching this threat in a rational, thoughtful manner, and are prone to either just treating everything that's going on as either cartoonish or just falling into the trap of hyperbole. And
they veer back and forth between, like we mentioned earlier, this hyperbolic frenzy and this hyper reactivity, where every Trump taunt or every rumor or every tweet is blown so incredibly out of proportion that it dominates the media consciousness. And if this is the way things are going to for the next 4 years, I've said this before and I really believe it, people are going to be driven literally insane, not figuratively insane. There are going to be people who sincerely lose their grip on reality, and they're going to become ill, I think. I mean, I don't want to diagnose anybody in particular, but I really do think that there are certain people who have been so transfixed by Trump for so long now that they really are going to become, not just ineffectual, but truly diseased.
I think I feel that one of the things, and I keep on saying this, that and the only reason I got into writing about Trump is because I was writing about addiction, and wherever I went for addiction, there was Trump supporters. And so I see a lot of parallels in a community that hands itself over to drug use and one that hands itself over to Trump politics, or where drugs resonate, Trump seems to resonate. And I've been pointing this out for a year, and it seems that the studies and people have done the actual statistics show that in counties where there's ill health, Trump overperforms. But one of the things that is true about addiction, and I always say, is part of the appeal of drugs to a lot of people is the drama that's associated with drugs. The kind of, they get excited almost, and it's kind of like their life is boring. In comes drugs with all sorts of drama, even if it's bad drama. Even if it's ugly drama, that it's just like it somehow makes her life meaningful, to be part of something that's kind of like, you can tell tall tales about. Oh, do you remember when we did X? Oh, that crazy night. Oh man, we were crazy. Yeah, wow. Boy, you did some crazy things. That you're part of a story. And Trump. A lot of Trump's appeal is that same thing. People get into the drama of it. It's like this big show that they're part of now. They're not just watching the show, they're part of it. And that's really appealing to a lot of people. And I think if I had to have one kind of way to say how you neutralize Trump is take the drama away. Just take the drama away.
And Trump sees him as he's an entertainer. He was a reality TV show.
And so he knows what he's doing, and so
this is why he would constantly be talking about his polling numbers, and he would be giving people the inside story about what was going on with the race because he wanted people to feel like that they were part of an adventure.
Yes, exactly. You have to be part of. He wants you to be part of the show, and it gives your life meaning. It's like, wow, man, it's like this is like everybody wants a 15 minutes fame, man. This is being part of the show, man. You're not just watching the TV. You're part of the TV, man. This is it. And that's the same.
It's really such an incredibly. It's such like a postmodern type of thing. It's hard to even conceptualize.
I was talking to he's a professor of political science. He's at this point 82. He's at Johns Hopkins. William E. Conley. You know the name?
Not sure.
Really interesting guy. But I forget the term he used. He was talking about how one of the things that we have these days is But let me just go back real quick to that, which is you got to take the drama. You got to take the drama out of it. You got to make it. I hate to use this term, but you got to normalize Trump. You got to just make it like, oh yeah, that guy.
Oh God, normalize. Everybody learn that term simultaneously.
Hey, I didn't want to use it. So I had to. I was using it in a mocking way. Okay,
But like TV news is never going to want to normalize Trump. They want him to be as new and fresh as possible because they make them money. Remember, Les Moonves of CBS said, Trump might be bad for the country, but he's good for CBS.
Everybody's just got a soft kitty for the law. Soft kitty, just calm down. And in that sense, if his appeal is solely, in my belief, if so much of his appeal is just the drama, that's not a very deep attraction. And so once the drama's gone, once he's boring, and then his supporters will peel away very quickly, in my opinion, and find something else. But William E. Conley is a professor of political science at Johns Hopkins, and we were talking on Friday, and he was talking about how one of the things we have these days, partly because of the media, is we have, I forget the term, see if I can remember the term he used. We have this kind of, nowadays we have these what's he call it? Sorry to we have what's called the politics of the event. Politics of the event is what he calls it, and we have this steady stream of big events happening. Not just hurricanes, but all these dramatic things that are happening. And when the
mass shootings,
the Arab Spring, or like a bus accident in Finland, or
Sandy Hook massacre happened 4 years ago.
Yeah, you have all these things that get blown. They're all bad. I'm not diminishing each one, but they become this big resonant event on the news, and they're one after another because the media needs them. So they find a disaster, and they elevate it to the story. And whether it's really a disaster or it's kind of just this kind of unsettling event. And yeah, that's good. We need to be aware of these things in the world. But if you're an outsider and you're sitting and watching your TV and you're in, wherever you are, it's very unsettling. It makes you feel very anxious. It makes the world seem very out of control. And so the gap between the real fear we should have versus the fear we have, what's being is large, and so there's a sense of things are out of control. And Trump plays on that, because people are like, oh my God, did you see? And I heard this a lot in my travels, is people, the fear of just these really absurd events was much higher than it should have been. The fear of a terrorist attack. I mean, come on, a terrorist attack in Prestonburg, Kentucky, come on, it's not going to happen. Thank God.
Remember in Lewiston, Maine, they had the weapons of mass destruction detection squad.
Yes, there's just intense, and so you turn on your news, and every day there's a new event that's been hyped. Oh my God, breaking news, blah, like a ship overturned in so and so, and it creates a very sense of unsettlement, and it's created a perfect condition for someone who's authoritarian to say, okay, yes, I can control this stuff. I can make it stop. We need a strong hand, and a strong hand that will take us back to the past. And so, and the thing that's really unique about Trump in that sense is he also is getting kind of meta because he's creating these events himself. He creates these momentary events, which is also unsettling. So this whole world feels a lot more unsettled than it is. And he exploits that. So I think, again, I think the solution in many ways to dealing with Trump, in my opinion, is no drama, man. Take the drama out. It's kind of what you try to do with addiction when you're working with addicts, is you kind of find a way to find meaning other than through drugs and the drama attached. The hardest thing to get someone to remove themselves from is to get them to be bored, to be comfortable being bored.
I think a lot of this is sort of like abstract, though. 'Cause, I mean, how does somebody in practice take the drama out of Trump. I mean,
Well, I
there's only
mean,
so much anybody can do on an individual level. I think the best strategy for counteracting Trump would be for the opposition party to behave in a healthy manner.
well, exactly. That's it. Behave, normalize that sense, meaning just don't take the bait.
Here's the thing. I mean, this meme that you have to resist the normalization of Trump. I mean, that's going to prevent or impede many of his opponents from behaving rationally. And so they're gonna go from crisis to crisis. They're gonna latch onto these wild gambits to prevent him, like the electoral college thing, the Russia stuff, which seems like it's going to go on for perpetuity now. And they're not going to devise a practical program which will appeal to people and which will correct the errors that they made over the past 2 years.
I mean, my advice, and again, it's you can't not one person can do it. Obviously, it has to happen in mass. Is act rationally, behave rationally, and get involved locally. I mean, the Democrats got crushed because they don't control anything at the state and local level. So the Republicans have done the grassroots organization they need to take over their cities and their states and their legislatures. Get involved locally, act rationally, and on a much more meta level, much more philosophical level, my whole thesis has always been about meaning and about enemy and about purposefulness. And a lot of people are attracted to Trump because there's not a lot else going on in their life. They don't have a lot of meaning. They don't feel involved. They don't feel integrated. They have a lot of.
I have to jump in and push back just there really quickly because this goes back to something that I mentioned earlier. So were there Clinton supporters who were drawn to her out of enemy because they lacked meaning? Why is it that we put the Trump supporter under the microscope to such a greater extent than we would the Clinton supporter? I mean, there are plenty of Clinton supporters, I'm sure, who are suffering similar ills. So and then this idea that like if people had meaning, they would naturally gravitate towards Democrats, I think is presumptive.
Well, again, because of my front row back row piece, I always say that the front row has a meaning. It's their careers and their education. We're a country that ranks on education. And if you look at the results of the election, the biggest determinant of Trump overperforming versus Romney or underperforming was education. That's true in no matter the income and no matter the race. So again, I can give you a little graph, and you can. But as I say, it's the level of meaning, the level of satisfaction you have in this world we created is roughly correlated with how much education you have. And we rank based on education. We give more money to the more educated you are, the more money you make generally, but also the more status you have, the more social capital you have. And so by and large, Clinton supporters are educated people relative to Trump supporters. And so they feel more comfortable in this world. They're in the in club in a sociological sense. And when you're on the out club is when you use drugs. It's the same reason people who are on the out club who are ejected from polite society, who don't feel a member, they're the ones who use drugs, and they're the ones who support Trump. And but going back to my philosophical take, I don't know how you solve that. I just don't know how you solve that. So in a world in which they don't feel, a lot of people, including people who voted for Trump, including African Americans and minorities who voted for Trump, who don't feel like they have a lot going on for them, economically or culturally or socially, don't feel part of the in club. I mean, I think the next shoe to drop is going to be you're going to have a revolt in the minority community, both to Trump but also to the situation that occurred before.
I just sort of worry about overly pathologizing voting behavior and taking the fact that somebody voted for Trump as a sign that they have all these sort of internal struggles and they're in the midst of this turmoil. I think a lot of people's reasons for voting is just pretty banal. I mean, it's not something they give great thought to. I mean, there are some people who just decided at the last minute to, hey, whatever, I'll vote for Trump or I'll vote for Clinton. I mean, it's not a defining feature of their lives. So I just worry that when you kind of make a grand sweeping narrative out of people's voting preferences, as valid as it might be in certain respects, maybe you sort of overcomplicate it, or you imbue it with something that maybe isn't warranted.
No, I think that everything in these, yeah, sure. I mean, political groups are what do you call them? Are a combination of things, and a coalition. Sorry, that's the word. But elections are driven by the marginal, the person who switches their vote now and then. The marginal boost in enthusiasm, and those things, the marginal, the first derivative, is driven by, in my mind, pathologies, or the bigger issues. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a big bulk of the electorate that just is going to do the same thing no matter what. But
I guess that may be true, and that's another irony because going back to 2012, the idea was that elections from here on out would be about driving up base turnout. So they wouldn't be about persuasion anymore. They would just be about identifying members of the pre-existing coalition and ensuring sufficient rates of turnout. So you see, for the 2016 Clinton campaign, they really de-emphasized persuasion. Even David Brock, this evil overlord who oversees this constellation of Clinton-connected entities, he went on a podcast yesterday on Politico and was just asked to give his autopsy about what went wrong. And he mentioned for the first time in his life, he went canvassing on the weekend prior to the election in Philadelphia, and he was given a packet to reference and all the canvassing ordinary tools, but he wasn't given what's called like a persuasion sheet, or a sheet that you would refer to if the person you're interacting with is ambivalent or on the fence, or maybe could be persuaded. Because the directive from the top of the campaign was that they wouldn't bother persuading anybody. It was just about identifying pre-existing supporters and getting them and turning them out. So, and I think that's bad for the party's long-term prospects, for any candidate's long-term prospects, because most people aren't political junkies, and they don't have fixed opinions, and they are amenable to persuasion if it's framed properly. And I think Trump prevailed in part because he got people who normally vote Democrat in certain key regions. So Florida Panhandle, Northern Maine, Northeastern Pennsylvania, Southeastern Ohio. We know all these places now. He got them to vote for him and to alter their voting behavior because he implemented persuasion. And the Clinton people totally shunned that. And I think if there's a lesson to learn going forward, it's that you can't totally discount the efficacy of having of trying to persuade voters.
I would just say that Trump was his voters were more enthusiastic. They just cared more, and they cared a hell of a lot. And I feel like an idiot in retrospect for not recognizing that more, because I saw it. I saw it every day for 400 days.
At least you can't say I didn't warn you.
Yeah, I agree. You were right. You were right. What you were right about was a lack of enthusiasm amongst I got the enthusiasm of the Trump supporters. I missed the lack of enthusiasm amongst the Clinton supporters. I mean, I ended up getting there. I actually wrote a piece 2 weeks before the election that Clinton supporters are not very enthusiastic. But yeah, I mean, I just it's pretty clear to me in retrospect that had Clinton basically not pivoted right and pivoted left, not try to symbolically get the Jeb voters and symbolically get the Bernie supporters, she would have been in better shape. I didn't think that at the election, at the time.
Yeah, at the same time, though, I mean, in the immediate aftermath of the election, it did look like that she woefully underperformed Obama by millions of votes. But now, as you know, the tally is just now being finalized. It's going to be final on Friday. She'll only end up having underperformed something like 1/10 of a percentage point nationwide. So that's caused me to reevaluate some of my assumptions.
Yeah, but
she did. I mean, she did get some of these moderate Republicans to vote for her. I mean, not at huge numbers, but there were some. I mean, that's why she won Orange County, California, the first time a Democrat has won since 1936.
Yeah, when all the dust is
it redound to her benefit electorally because it occurred in states where that weren't viable in the Electoral College.
Yeah, but in retrospect, when the dust is cleared, she underperformed the minority community, right?
Yeah, she did, and it was especially pronounced in the Midwest. So she overperformed writ large, but the underperformance was was more than average in Milwaukee, Detroit, Flint.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a week in Milwaukee 3 weeks before the election, so I should have. I mean, and I was tweeting at the time saying, like, there's really not that many people here who are enthusiastic. And I saw it in Cleveland when I was there for the convention. I spent my time in Althwaite projects that week. There just wasn't a lot of enthusiasm amongst the working men. And you know what? The other thing was, and again, I only spent time in the working class African American community, not the middle class. There was not a lot of hatred. There was. Let me rephrase that. There was a surprising amount of people who were not angry at Trump. Who were just like,
I found the same thing, and I tweeted that observation when I was on my trip, and I got absolutely pilloried by these Twitter know-it-alls.
Well, again,
we're imputing some kind of racist motivation or
my African American.
And my claim, let me just flesh out briefly what my claim was. My claim was never that the black voters that I had made a point to interact with in the South, throughout much of the South, it wasn't that they were in favor of Trump by any stretch. Although I did encounter a couple, anomalies who actually were in favor of Trump, all men, and Trump did end up winning something like 12% of black men, but. It was that they weren't as hysterical or they weren't as worked up about Trump as you might expect if you follow the predominant media narratives.
That's exactly what I found, and I actually wrote about that or tweeted about that as well at the time. An older black gentleman who I respect a lot responded to me, suggesting that part of that was I was in the working class black neighborhoods. I mean, I was in very poor black neighborhoods, and their attitude was very different than from middle class or upper class blacks. And that's been borne out.
And the pushback that I got tended to be largely from relatively well-off blacks who are in some of these more who are in urban areas like New York and Washington and so forth. So they have a different mindset probably than rural blacks in Louisiana. And pointing that out, and to point that out gets you immediate blowback. Although it just seems perfectly sensible to me that opinions among black Americans would differ based on geographic region and socioeconomic status, just like any other voters.
I think it's again a function of education. I think in the African Americans who are in the front row, who have a postgraduate degree or a 4-year plus degree, are much more outraged by Trump than the African Americans I've met who are who haven't finished college, haven't finished high school, the working class African Americans. I met a fair share of people, African Americans, who bought the line. And there's a guy in Milwaukee I'm thinking of in particular who, Trump's a good businessman. Let's give him a shot. And then I said, what about his racism? He's like, yeah, but there was a sense of almost like, I think the word he phrased was, I'm kind of used to whites being racist. So,
it's just not, it's not as, they don't have as an alarmist a view of that as people in these more elite circles.
At the time I wrote it more as a depressed resignation. The sense of like, damn, this world's been unjust, and it's been unjust a long time. And
a black woman wrote to me after that episode, and she used a way to describe it that I think is correct. It's depressive realism.
Yes, I mean I said a resignation.
So like if you're, and that the day that happened, I was in New Orleans, and I was challenged by people on Twitter to go talk to more black people. So I did. And I went to the 6th Ward, I think it was, and just chatted with people, and they basically were saying, yeah, we don't like Trump, but we have no reason to panic about it. Look at the situation we're in anyway. They're talking about what happened to Hurricane Katrina, and this woman ended up, she gave me a really harrowing story that I wrote about, and it's in a Medium post about how, she had just given birth a few days prior to Katrina, and she had to go, and she was, she was brought to the Superdome, and she claims she witnessed rapes at the Superdome, and her life basically hasn't been, it's normalized now, but that was a huge trauma for her. So the idea that they need to be excessively worked up about Trump just doesn't accord with their day-to-day reality.
As I said, the further you're out of the money, the less you're worried about the system breaking down, because it's already broken down for you. So I think there's a lot of that. But again, I know even saying just having this discussion, we're going to get yelled at. But I'm just reporting what I saw, which is,
I did the same.
The outrage in the African American communities I was in was less than I expected, and less than I would have expected, certainly from reading social media, and less than I would say a white liberal community. Now,
absolutely, I totally agree.
Now, that doesn't mean that the consequences are going to be. I'm not saying they don't have more to lose from a Trump presidency. I'm not saying that at all. They do, but I feel like they recognize, or there's a sense of almost resignation and frustration of saying.
Here's what's annoying. It's annoying. These liberal communities that are especially outraged, who are affluent, postgraduate types, they will the alleged anger of the poor black communities for their own ends. So they will cite that supposed anger to justify why they're so angry, but they don't actually go to those places. So how would they know?
But there was anger. I'm not saying there wasn't,
but not the kind of like frenetic, excessive anger.
When this is all over, I can tweet pictures of the African American men I met and women who actually told me, kind of quietly, like, yeah, they don't mind Trump. I met two African Americans who were going to vote for Trump.
I met the same type of people, and actually at the final Trump rally that I was at in Raleigh, there were some black people there. So
they're all very low income there, and and the amount of hyperbolic language, anti-Trump language I got from the African American community was less than the hyperbolic language I got from a college campus of likes.
Yep. That closely aligns with my experience.
So,
and we're definitely going to get yelled at, but I'm pretty used to it at this point.
I think it's, again, I want to be careful and make sure that people know that I'm not saying that Trump isn't a racist, or I'm trying to.
I'm just so sick of having to add these qualifiers.
or I'm not trying to,
Like, I mean,
even more careful, I want to be very careful, or I'm not trying to claim I speak for African Americans community at all.
Of course not. That's such a ridiculous interpretation.
I'm just saying what, well, I'm just saying what I saw. And
that's what I was doing, but I got accused of trying to speak for Black people, and that's obviously I'm not doing that. I'm relaying my experiences and I'm summarizing my interactions with people. Yeah. That's called reporting. I mean, that's the essence of reporting.
On that wonderful, I do have to jump.
I just wanted to ask you really quickly before we end. So you've been treated to a mini profile in the Washington Post lately by the excellent Margaret Sullivan.
Yeah, that was very sweet of her.
You've been on CNN with Don Lemon and had some other appearances. How does this newfound elite media attention feel to you? How do you process it?
I don't feel like that's what it is. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a few one-offs. I'm certainly flattered. I mean, I guess I would say, in my own little way, I kind of am glad I have some attention because I want to bring more attention to the project I'm doing, which is on poverty and addiction. I don't want to spend my next year writing about Trump. I don't want my next year yelling on Twitter.
Well, you were done. I mean, you declared that you were done writing about Trump like a month before the election, but you couldn't get away.
Which is why I went to Milwaukee to write about African American community there, and then the editor put a Trump name in the headline, even though it had nothing to do with Trump. And
I even heard you cited in the New Statesman podcast. So the left wing UK magazine, they referenced you too.
Oh, okay. But no, I have cities lined up for this for my project next year, and very few of them are wrapped around Trump. I need to file this piece on Lewiston, Maine, which will be about Trump and at some level, because I went to hung out with the Somali community post-election, and people will be surprised how unangry they were. There was anger and frustration and fear and anxiety, but there wasn't outright outrage. And then I'm gonna, I hope I can use whatever little leverage I got this time to focus back on writing stories about all the working class, including minorities, that continue to write about Hispanics and Latinos and African Americans. I will say that I find having to put things in that TV and the media requires kind of small sound bites, and I find that a little bit frustrating. But I don't know if you found the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's sort of an art to it, and you can, obviously you're not going to be able to have as substantive a discussion as we've just had now, but I mean, I think there are a way you can communicate with concision certain ideas in those forums. I mean, but that's just sort of the nature of them. So, I mean, and for what it's worth, I thought that you did an effective job with Don Lemon. You sort of educated him.
I couldn't hear in my earpiece, so I didn't know what was going on. What are you doing next year?
I'm still kind of working that out. I should have mentioned at the beginning that people ought to subscribe to this YouTube channel. So if you've watched through, click on the subscribe button. I have to remember to do that a little more consistently. But yeah, I have now this subscription thing on Medium that some people have signed up for a monthly contribution. So that's very nice. And project in the works that I don't want to say anything about right now publicly. But in addition to that, I'm just kind of doing what I've been doing. I'm going to go, I think, to the inauguration in January, and then from there I'm going to go to El Paso. And it's partial coincidence in your recommendation, and also I have other stuff going on there. So
my favorite city in the United States. So
yeah. And I do want to learn Spanish, so maybe I'll just hang out there for a while.
All right. Well, it was thank you for the time talking, and maybe do it in January again.
Yeah, we should. People seem to enjoy it. I know I get a lot out of it, so let's keep it up.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.